Hello and welcome to the Supercharged live stream. I'm Surma.
And I'm Jake.
And today we're going to do server-side
Service workers. See, Paul couldn't make it into the office because of the British train system, so I thought we could have a whole episode entirely devoted to service workers.
Hey, I made it. What are you doing here?
Well, because you were late, I thought we could do this entire thing all about service workers.
No, you keep doing this. You keep trying to take over. Can we have one thing around here that is not about you and service workers?
Okay, show of hands. Who wants this episode to be about service workers? Fine.
Oh, well, that's rid of him then. So, sorry about my the tardiness on the showing up front. Awkward. So what are we doing?
We are actually going to do server-side rendering. And we're going to do it with you and not with Jake. There was a lot of confusion on Twitter. It was actually very enjoyable.
Whoops. Yeah. Anyway, but I did make it, and that's fine. I'm not doing the coding today. You're doing the coding. Yeah, it's a bit of a switch around. I'm going to be on hand to answer questions and talk to the folks, and I can already see we've got lots of comments coming in.
Loads of people in there already.
Hello to everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to have you here. So do feel free to keep chatting away. And
you can make Paul interrupt me so that I do more mistakes.
Yes.
My goal for today is try to do less typos than you do, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to fail.
Although
you do set the bar pretty high.
Oh, but this is my revenge. I'm going to be very supportive throughout.
Support.
Right.
Server-side rendering.
Server-side rendering.
Let's
okay.
get our
What are you
hands
doing?
dirty.
What are you doing?
Server-side rendering. Yeah, actually, I should probably explain because this word has been, all those 3 words, 2 words, if you were to use a hyphen.
Just those words.
Have been thrown around a lot. And I feel like there's not a very consistent understanding of what it actually means, and so I'm trying to capture it in a few words. Server-side rendering is what you want to do if you have a single-page app. If you think back to the first router that we did, we actually used a little Python web server, I think you wrote, that whatever you requested, you would get back the index HTML. So if you requested /about or just home or /contact, you would always get the same index HTML, which means in that site there wouldn't be the content that you actually wanted to read. So you would have to wait for the JavaScript to spin up, to analyze the path that has been requested, and to swap out the content in the DOM with the actual content.
And then we switched it up to the advanced router, which did actually have individual pages for like about, contact, misc, whatever it was, and then we pulled those in over.
But that would mean that whenever you change something in the layout, that you would have to do the edits in all of these individual pages.
Right. So presumably that's what we're trying to figure out today.
Server-side rendering basically still is always deliver the index HTML, but already inject the content before serving it to the user. So you render the DOM on the server side, that is why it's called this way, and send it to the user, so the content is already there without the JavaScript needing to run at all.
Yeah.
And then hydration happens, where the JavaScript spins up and takes care of all the dynamic parts.
Go,
let's get our hands dirty and write some code. I'm gonna start with something. So we're going to write Node on the back end. We're going to write a Node web server that does the server-side rendering. So I'm going to make this a script with copyright headers so that we can run JavaScript just with executing the script. I thought for this, so I have in the folder here, I have an app folder where basically our advanced router code is in the thing that we wrote 2 sessions ago, I think. It's exactly the same. No, not much editing has been done. And for this one, I decided that I want to use Express. Express is just a little bit of convenience about Node's native web server, so that we have a simple web server and use it by creating an Express app. And this app object is where we're going to do all the routes.
So have you done an npm install?
Yeah, I have the modules in here with Express and all the other things that I plan to be using. I'll explain as I go along what I'm actually using.
Okay.
So we want to start with something simple. We're just going to write a web server that is just a straight web server that does nothing else. So what we can do there is we want to say that our app uses a middleware that is called static. So what this line does is just says to Express, just serve this folder, the app folder, as static content.
Cool.
Which is static web server. And then we're going to use Node's HTTP server, create server that serves our app, and we make it listen on 8080.
And you got this all committed in your head?
Well, Node that is what Node excels at, right? Very simple code that you can.
Well, bravo. I mean, well done. It's very good.
So let's do this.
Who doesn't love a bit of chmodding?
Chmodding. It's like the
plus X. That makes it executable, right? Because you added that line at the top, so that it's actually a thing that can be run.
If I do this, hopefully.
You can't find Module Express.
Well, that's good. It's in there though, right? No, it's not. That's like the only module I forgot to install. So let's do some good old npm install because.
Oh, that means we have to do the install dance while we wait for it to go. While we clone the internet.
It's already done because Express is not that big.
Oh, so I was only partway through the install dance.
Yeah, it does have a very elaborate install dance.
Fine. So we got a question here. Why not use import express from Express? Why are you doing the old sort of require rather than anything newer?
So the thing is that modules for me are still a little bit iffy. It's just something, especially on the npm side, it doesn't feel as right. I'm not even sure if Node 4, which is what I'm using, already supports the import syntax. I'm not sure if we would need Mabel in between. I don't know. And also, imports are declarative and not imperative, and sometimes you do want to have, like I did here, you do want to have the imperative way.
Okay, like grab this thing and then do this thing with
exactly.
it. Okay, fine.
So for now, I'm just sticking to require until the entire JavaScript ecosystem sorts out how to do modules. It's just for me to keep me sane.
Okay.
So.
Well, it's a start. It's actually working.
There's no error at least. That's good. So if we go to localhost,
8080.
There it is.
Okay.
Our good old. Oh, this is actually a little bit cramped.
Make it. Can you do the? Oh, there we go. Oh, I can feel the tension as you're trying to. Do I get it right? Okay.
Okay.
So I like how you've selected them all as well by accident.
Yeah,
that feels good.
So I want to see the protocol as well.
That ruined it. Why don't you just make DevTools a bit bigger, dude? Oh,
I could.
HTTP 1.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
There you go. Just yeah. There you
go. So, we got this. And now what I wanted to do is, I wanted to port this to HTTP2 because this is the future and we should do this. But for that, we need TLS certificates. So because I forgot to download it, I will go to Google Chrome simple HTTP2 server, because not only is it a simple HTTP2 server, but it will also allow us to generate certificates. So I'm just going to download the Darwin version.
Is that going to go to you? Yeah.
Which should be here. There we go. And then we go download simple, boom, boom. And now we have a certificate, which we can use. And I'm going to show you how exactly. So we need a.
So wait, you basically. So for anybody who's not seen this before, you built a simple, a bit like the Python simple server, but it's built in Go, and it's an HTTP2 server, so it has to be running on HTTPS. So you've got a self-signed certificate that you've made that it makes for
on the fly for you, yeah.
And then you're treating it wherever you run it from, whichever folder you run it from. You'll treat that as the folder that you're serving from.
Exactly.
Okay, so.
And I just used it for the ability to generate a certificate because using the OpenSSL command line tools is so painful, which is the original motivation to write simple HTTP2 server, to not have to do that manually anymore.
So all you're using it for, right? You want the certificates, and now you're going to use them here.
Exactly. Okay. So what we can do exactly is that we are going to use require fs and do fs read file sync. We're going to do synchronous because I'm dirty like that. And we're going to use the key and the cert, read file sync cert.pem. And now what we should be able to do is just to turn over to HTTPS and add the options parameter to our create server, and now it should actually be HTTPS, so let's try that. No error, that's good. We can close this. Let's add this.
So we get this, which is basically, because it's a self-signed certificate, Chrome is going to say, that
this is not actually secure. Like, it is secure in terms of encryption, but not authenticity.
Yeah,
it can ensure that we're actually talking to the right server. But since we're on localhost, we have the option to say, I know what I'm doing. Let's proceed.
Yeah.
And as you can see, we have HTTPS with the right flag because, as I said, it's not authentic, but it works.
So now we're still serving on HTTP 1, is that right?
Yes, okay. Because I just switched to HTTPS. Now, ideally, what I would like to do is using HTTP2. However, Express currently doesn't work with the HTTP module because the HTTP2 npm module is still very much in development. What we can use, however, is the speedy module,
Huh.
which, interestingly enough, does actually serve HTTP2. You just don't have the option to push. So it is a valid HTTP2 server. And since we're not going to do pushing today,
You have to
I
restart your
have to
server.
restart my.
You can't just. It's just going to work like this.
Actually, no,
Oh,
it isn't. Wait, did I restart? Did I save? Speedy. Let's restart it just to make sure. This is interesting. Options. Yeah, it worked on TLS. Let's just give HTTP2 a try just to make. I'm not sure if I have it installed actually. I have it installed apparently. Let's try it.
Oh, something very strange is going on,
That is
isn't
already
it?
strange.
Why don't you try a different port entirely?
Yeah, let's try a different port. Let's try 8081. Let's restart that. Go to here.
Oh, interesting.
That is interesting. Right.
So the question is, why do we not get HTTP2?
So we are reading the certificate. I mean, there's not much code where I could do something wrong here, honestly.
No, there isn't.
I'm passing in the options. I'm passing in the app.
Hey, well, do you know what? I feel better that it's not just me that has the bugs.
This is what I expected. I expected this to. I am also in this right folder, right?
As far as I can see.
Yeah, there's speedy. Everything. I mean, at the very least, it should be speedy. See what I did there? It should be speedy.
It should,
Anyway.
it should be speedy. Huh.
I'm just gonna skip over this for now.
Okay, we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll probably get back to it. So let's stick with HTTP1.
Somebody's suggesting it might be the caching, but
I did do a hard refresh.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw you do that too.
Oh, that's because I have the.
Did you go back to 8080?
Oh, that's because I still have the options in there. Actually, let's stay with HTTPS just to make
live.
Let's start the server again. Put the HTTPS back in there. This is working. Let's stick with this.
Yeah, somebody said restart the browser. I like this. People are basically saying, switch it off. And
Turn
on
it
again.
off. Now, you know what? I'm gonna give this a try.
And I like that people are, I mean, we all like to do that.
So I'm gonna restart the server.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill this. I'm gonna restart Chrome, open DevTools on the network tab, and go to HTTPS localhost 8081.
No, it doesn't like you. Okay, well,
let's
we'll
just
move on.
keep it going. So, right now what we're doing, this should all be working. We can go to our different website, at our different subsections, and it loads because we're just doing a static server. What we actually want to do, though, is we want to add special handling whenever an HTML file is requested, because this is where we do our server-side rendering.
Okay.
So what we're going to use is app.get, saying whenever there's a get request for, and now we're going to use regular expressions. Don't hurt yourself. I'm going to try to make this understandable.
Okay.
So what we want to do is
Why do you add the I on the end there?
because case insensitive.
Okay,
I like
cool.
case insensitive.
Sorry, I'm going to be that person because
I've noticed.
Yeah, yeah, because that's it's reading somebody else's regular expressions is.
It can be very painful.
It can. Okay.
And this is probably not going to be pretty. Also, because I'm just talking about this, this is not production code. It's not going to end up being a production-ready web server or a production-ready backend. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to doing like I/O optimizations or to do very efficient server-side caching or these kind of things. This is mostly to show how to implement server-side rendering. It's about a technique, not about a specific high-performance implementation in this regard.
Yep.
Although we're going to have performance in mind because this is why we're doing this, and this is Supercharged after all,
it
right?
is what we do.
All right, so let's think about this. When do we actually want to handle a request? That is either when the path that is being requested ends with a slash, or, with this the or for expression, if it has a slash, something that is not a slash with a slash at the end.
Is that right? Do we know? So.
Or index HTML, right?
Wow, that's already tremendously readable. So, so what we're going for here is, so you could ask for like /home,
just /home/ or just
/home /index.html.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what we're trying to capture. So if you come up with any of those three, otherwise we're going to fall through to the static.
Exactly. So all the files that are there are going to be served just as we know. And this is why I love Node 4, because we have function. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to check it is actually working and just send back a test string. Hi.
Could have been on brand, but whatever. Okay, fine.
Okay, so I'm going to use supercharged. Hi. Let's restart the server, I hope. No syntax error, which is good. So if we just go here, supercharged hi.
Okay.
If you're going to go to about, supercharged hi. If I go to about index.html, supercharged hi.
And then presumably if we do like
static, what do we have for static? We have app, we have static, app.js.
Okay.
App
So this
JS.
should now fall through to, okay, so that's the static hosting that we
Yes.
had before. Okay.
Also, what I wanted to show, the middleware, the static middleware of Express is really nice because in the response, they take care of doing sensible defaults like default cache control, default adding an e-tag, doing the last modified
Okay,
stuff.
so let's talk about this very briefly because I know this is a bit of kind of a hidden gem, I suppose. Like when you understand about these headers, life can be a lot more straightforward. And I've seen people, for example, using a service worker and then trying to like cache bust and do all sorts of things because their headers are fundamentally, they're fighting with their headers, their caching headers, right?
Which sometimes is okay because, for example, on GitHub Pages, you don't have any control over the headers that they use, so you might have to resort to these things. But usually, if you have any control over your backend, which, for example, on S3 hosting you do, fix your headers.
Yes.
Because caching is part of HTTP and the entire ecosystem, so good caching headers are worth so much. So at least give yourself proper e-tags so that caching works for your clients and you reduce bandwidth that they use on the website.
So somebody's basically saying here their e-tags, they've never really understood what the point is of the e-tag. So why don't we take a moment and explain what e-tags are?
Let's do e-tags. E-tags are pretty great. Basically what they mean is that when you receive a document from a server, it gets an e-tag. And that e-tag is a guarantee that it will only change if the contents of the files have changed, which is why most server implementations use some kind of checksum like SHA-1 or SHA-256, MD5, whatever, to generate these e-tags. What the client can then do, put these files into its cache, and when the user goes back and requests the same file somewhere in the future, it can put an if non-match header in the request and add the e-tag so the server knows which version the user has available locally. And if the server sees, hey, I have the same version here that the user already has, the server will respond with a 304, meaning not modified, and you save the user re-downloading the entire contents.
Okay.
And what this is actually kind of weak, there's also weak e-tags, which
so you've highlighted this when it begins with a W/. Does that stands for a weak e-tag?
A weak e-tag,
okay.
Which is defined as the e-tag only changes if the semantics of the documents change, but they're not necessarily byte equivalent.
What does that even mean?
Exactly.
This file
I have never encountered them in the wild.
But you're saying that
this is what
Express
Express uses them by default.
But it still does byte different e-tags.
I guess. So what it means basically is they only have an effect if you're not doing range requests.
Okay.
Because they're not byte equivalent necessarily. You can't do range requests or use a part of it for a cache. But as long as you use the whole document, you can use the one you have if the e-tags are equivalent. I wouldn't worry about it too much. We're going to cover our own e-tags later.
Ooh,
I think.
How exciting.
Exciting indeed. So we are now in control of delivering our own HTML files. So let's...
Before you go any further, if you've just joined us, we are doing some server-side rendering today. We are taking the advanced router that we did a few episodes ago, and instead of kind of having a completely static setup for the HTML files, we're actually building them on the fly in the server. Surma has got some JavaScript code up and running, which is just at the moment sending us out some HTTPS basically, and we have, somebody remarked that you have managed to create a regular expression that worked the first time around, which is impressive, and I would agree. I watched you type that out, and I was like, I mean, that's unintelligible. I grant you that.
It really is.
Look at that in a few weeks, and you'll be absolutely terrified. But all the same, well done. So we've got this situation now where if we have a request to slash section slash, as in slash home slash, or slash home slash index.html, we will serve via this chunk of code in the middle, and then everything else is going to fall through to our static hosting.
Exactly, because that's also the Express, the order in which you declare your handlers or the steps is important because Express goes through them from top to bottom.
Okay.
All right, so now we have a handler that we have to implement. And the reason I did this is because let's look at our index.html, the original one, which you might remember or you might not. The thing is that between this index.html, the index.html in /about, the one in /contact, they're all pretty much the same except in the SC view elements that we wrote. The actual, for example, in this one, home has contents while the other ones are declared as remote because we are not on that page right now, but everything above and below is the same for all pages. So let's split those apart, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. So this one is what I'm going to call the header. Let's expand this so people can see where I'm actually going. Server-side rendering app. And this is going to be the header.partial.html. And let's go to the rest and call this the, oh, come on, don't always throw me out of the folder. There we go. The footer.partial.html. So now we have split up the file in header and footer, and the actual index.html will not contain much more than this. And I will add something here, which I will explain later. All right, so the actual index.html, which just has the content that is relevant for this page, is just one line, in this case because it's just one element. I already prepared this for the other subpages, so the about index.html also has just one line. Same for contact, just the content for that actual subsection. And the rest has been split apart in header and footer. And what we're going to do now is we're basically going to assemble the header, the actual content, and the footer in our handler. And I'm gonna introduce something new, which is we have been using the Node file system module to read files. But the thing is that Node currently, and they said they won't do this anytime soon in the future, they don't use promises. And reading multiple files with a callback-based API makes my head explode. And that's why there's a module called Modernize, or MZ, which has wrappers around all these basic APIs from Node and turns them into promise-based APIs. So what we can do now basically is we can do promise.all.
Okay, so you're doing 3 requests and 1 for the header?
Exactly. So I'm going to do app header partial HTML. Oop. I'm going to do...
This is really depressing. You're not making typos. Oh, fine, carry on.
App. And now we're going to need something here, which we're going to talk about in a second, which is index.html, the actual content of the section we want to load. And we're going to read the app. See, I did a typo.
Yay! I think it was just a pity typo, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it was.
Okay.
So we have to sort out what we're actually loading. And this is where the regex comes in, because I have put parentheses about the thing that will be the section that we want to load. And Express, being a nice guy, we can actually go and say the item that we want to load is, I think it's this. Let's check this. Let's just send back our item. So what I did here is I think it is params on the request object that contains the parenthesized parts of a regex. I'm just going to send it back to see if it actually works. So let's restart the server. Let's split our screen into, where is my Chrome? There we go. This is a little bit too small. So if I go here, we shouldn't see much, but if I go here, yeah, we have about. If I go about contact, we have contact. This is exactly what we want. So we have
one question that's come in is the routing that we have here, effectively, is it's different to the front end code that we had.
Totally.
And today, are we going to cover off using the same routing, or are we completely avoiding that for this?
No.
Cool.
The code that you wrote in the root advanced was
a disaster.
No, that's what you said. Not me.
Oh, yeah.
It's mostly going to remain untouched. We're going to do a little bit of tweaking later, maybe, if we get to it. I have an idea that I want to try out.
Ooh.
But for now, we're just going to do the delivery part. I mean, if we get this done, it might be interesting to talk about writing JavaScript that works in the front end, in the back end, and maybe even in the service worker, which is the trisomorphic JavaScript, which is a great buzzword that people came up with. But that's for the future. For now, let's start.
Right, and that must be server side, client side, and service worker based routing.
Yes. Which, eventually, maybe.
Terrific.
So we figured out what our item is, so we can just put this in this great template expression. So I'll just put item here. And what we're going to do next is we now have an array of files. So in case you don't know, read file returns buffer objects. We don't want buffers, we want strings. So what we're going to do is we're going to map over all our files and say to string and say this is UTF-8 encoded, and now we have an array of strings and not an array of buffers.
So easy.
It is so easy. And what we're going to do
Typo.
Are you going to call me out on anyone?
Yes.
We have an array of strings, so now we can do response send files join like this. And because we're good, we're also going to catch our errors. So if any of these fails, because for example, if any of these files don't exist, the promise.all will not resolve but reject. And now we can handle that in the catch part of our promise chain and say our response should have a status of 500 for now and send the error to string.
Okay.
So we're actually doing error handling, which usually in one-off code doesn't happen.
No,
so that's pretty cool.
Certainly doesn't in mine, as we may have noticed.
So let's restart our web server. And let's do curl, because we haven't done curl yet. Actually, yeah, you know what? Let's do curl. We're going to use -i, so we want to see the headers. But we're also going to use -k, that means ignore certificate errors. Because as remember, we're still serving over TLS with a self-signed certificate, and curl is going to reject unless we give it -k as an option.
Please tell me you know that stuff off by heart as well.
I've done so much curl that I actually know these two.
Hey, server error. Oh, that's undefined. Oh, why is it undefined?
Well, that's not nice.
Item's the param 0.
Because if it's undefined, we're going to use just an empty string.
Oh, okay.
The easy fix, right? Let's restart the server. Do another curl. There we go. So we have reassembled the entire file because you can see the header and the footer. However, if you take a closer look, you will see that we have 5 SC views because our header has all the remote views, and then we basically reiterate the home view with the actual content. Which, I don't even know if your code handles this. So if
don't do it. Don't do it.
I want to see it break.
It's gonna break.
Let me open the console for more fun in the error department.
Oh, thanks, pal. It's just broken. It's just nice.
There's not even an error.
It's just broken. It just yeah.
Let's look at the code, but it should be So as you can see here, I should zoom in. Oh, zoom in a little bit. We have 5 SC views, which is not what we want. So let's fix that. And one typical thing, or one easy way to fix it, is to turn our partials into templates that we can use with a template engine.
Oh, nice.
And my template engine of choice in this regard is because I know it pretty well, is handlebars.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty common.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to require in handlebars. Require handlebars.
So I've got a question here.
Yeah.
Is it normal to end up with routing in 3 places, or is that a no-no?
Currently, I would say it is pretty normal. I'm assuming that something like trisomorphic, at least isomorphic, that you can use in the front end and your service worker, is going to become a pretty common practice.
So I think there's a distinction here between just having the routing altogether.
Yeah.
So when you do progressive enhancement, you're going to build routing on the server side like this anyway, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to
because you usually have APIs and content delivery, all these kind of things in your app.
Right. And then you are probably going to progressively enhance into some routing on the client anyway. And then if you progressively enhance to have a service worker, you're going to have routing in there, something, at least you might do a pass-through actually, just kind of going, well, unless you're building streams
Yeah.
on the fly in the service worker, for example, which is
Don't say that too loud. Or
he will come back in the room if I say streams too loudly. That's Jake, by the way.
We're safe, I think.
I think we're so far.
Soundproof wall.
Okay.
Good investment.
Whew. Anyway, okay, so it's probably pretty normal, and whether it's actually the same code, the isomorphic, trisomorphic thing.
So personally, I'm not a big believer in trisomorphic because even though I'm writing Node right now, that is not the only language you can use on the back end. There is like Go, Python,
PHP, come on.
Yeah, there's
You're going to say it.
definitely. There's Java. There's servlet pages.
That is true.
And you can't share JavaScript code with a PHP backend unless you're doing really weird things. And
Technically, there's still CGI bin.
that is yes, please don't.
Okay. So, I interrupted you.
I just imported required handlebars, and now what I'm basically just going to do is I'm going to take all my files, and for each file, I'm going to say handlebars, compile this as a template, and execute it with a request as the context. So that means that inside our header, content, and footer, we have access to everything in the request object. But since we need item, I'm just going to add item as a new object to our request so that we have this inside our context. So I'm turning all the files into strings, compiling them with handlebars, executing them, and then reassembling the website. What we're going to do now is I would like to use handlebars if, but the problem is that handlebars if only checks for truthy or falsy values. It doesn't actually evaluate expressions. What I would like to do is if item is equal to home, then I would like to skip this. But this doesn't. This is not actually. In this case, it would be empty because home is the default. But handlebars can't do this. So I'm gonna write my own helper, which means if not equal. This doesn't exist yet. We're gonna write it.
Okay.
So let's if not equal.
So we're going to have one of these for every single section.
Exactly. So we're going to see if this is for about.
If you're just joining us, Surma and I are doing some server-side rendering today. We are taking the advanced router from the previous episodes, and we're basically making it, rather than having a bunch of static files, we're now actually putting in some JavaScript to generate these files on the fly, and we're in the middle of that process. You're currently basically making our templates and making the HTML sort of dynamic so that it can be built on the fly by the JavaScript that we have. And
well observed.
Thank you very much. I am actually here for the duration. And of course, you can join us, you can ask your questions, and there are some brilliant remarks already coming in. Unfortunately, Jake is still shouting service worker every other
You can't hear
second.
it, but it's there.
Well, I hear it. I mean, I read it and I hear it, and it's a big problem. All the same, do fire in your questions and your comments, and we'll carry on this end. So you got handlebars. You're making these dynamic.
Yes. So now we just used if not equal, even though it doesn't exist. So let's better make it exist. So there's a register helper call if not exist, and this is where handlebars turns into black magic, because it just gives you as many parameters as the helper takes and a magic options element at the end. And what we're going to do here is we're going to check if A is not equal to B. We are going to options function this. Now this is just something I have to admit I memorized this, because what this does is the options object contains the function that will generate the string that is in between our mustache braces in the markup code. And this is just the context that we passed in origin. So in this case, it's going to be the request object. Basically, what we're doing is we're only going to render the things in between our if not equals blocks if A does not equal B, which is what we wanted to say with if not equal. So fingers crossed if this actually works or not. I'm going to restart my server. I'm going to expect syntax errors.
There aren't any. Oh, yeah. Big show off.
Yeah. So let's restart this. It's actually a little big, isn't it?
That looks like it's actually correct, because it's gone straight to the context section.
We can click again. That is good. So let's look at the code. And as you can see, we only have 4 SC views. And the one that is actually live is missing from the remote ones.
Okay. Wow.
So we achieved our goal of only rendering certain parts depending on what page we are currently on. So that means we basically just achieved our server-side rendering. We are injecting the content that is actually requested before any JavaScript on the client side runs. And yet we're more or less just delivering the same page over and over, our header and our footer.
So what would you do in terms of, say, caching this? Because if you build these pages all the time, what would you actually do to say, for example, not have to rebuild these for every individual visitor?
You know what? Let's do that. Let's build good caching headers. So we're gonna before we send the file, we just assembled our content. So this content variable holds the actual bytes that we are about to send down to the client. And what we could do is we could use these contents to actually calculate a hash value of the contents and use that as an e-tag.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Luckily,
There's a crypto. Of course there is.
Node has crypto.
Hey, you know, in the last episode, I asked you what the German was for CSS.
Yeah.
What would be an appropriate? Is there an appropriate kind of German term
for server-side rendering?
Yeah.
Server-side rendering, I guess, could be called servierseitige Vorlagenausführung, which is exactly what we're doing right now. And in case you're German, you know exactly what I just said.
I've again, like always, I've got no chance of either remembering or pronouncing it correctly, but it just sounds so cool. Well, I'm still going to call it server-side rendering.
If you want to have more German, let us know, and I'll make sure it happens. So we have the contents, and what we're going to do now is we're going to calculate a hash, and the hash is going to be crypto create hash, maybe. Actually, let's use Node and say crypto is require crypto, and then crypto create hash. Tab completion for the win.
Okay.
And we're going to use SHA-256 because that is decently good. Do some indentation. We're going to append content. It's called update because you can incrementally add data to a hash and have it hash it over time if you just have segments. That's why the function is called update, which I find a little bit confusing. And then in the end, we want to have a digest as a hex value. So that basically gives us a string that encodes the hash value with a hex format. And what we can do now, since we have the hash, we can go here and say respond set. Set is the call that sets the headers of our response. We can just give it a dictionary. And in this dictionary, we can say, for one, we want to set the e tag, which is our hash. And because while we're at it, we can also set a proper cache control. Public, no cache. And this is something I wanted to talk about because cache control is such a complex beast. I've been trying to wrap my head around it, and there's so many facets to this entire thing. It can do so much that I just memorized basically 2 things that I'm ever going to use with cache control. It can do like private caches, intermediate proxies, you have control over everything. But most of the time, you just want public, no cache. And it sounds wrong, but it's not. So something I used before when I didn't know what I was doing was must revalidate. Because that sounds right to me, right?
So you're saying is that this should go out, it should try and get it from the server again before anything
exactly.
else.
So I want the client to send a request to the server using the cache checkers like if non-match or if modified since to see it should always revalidate with the server if the cached version is still fresh, still up to date.
Okay.
However, must revalidate doesn't do that because what must revalidate actually means is once the resource expires, it should be revalidated. So what you would actually have to get it right is max age 0, meaning it expires immediately after reception. It should always revalidate. And as it turns out, max age 0 and must revalidate, there's a short version which is called no cache. So even though it says no cache, caching is actually still happening, but with a validation round trip.
Okay. So we got a question from somebody basically asking whether the code will be visible somewhere after the session, and the answer is
Of course. As
yes.
always, we're going to put it onto our GitHub repository. We're going to link it up in the video description, I guess.
Yep.
It's on our Google Chrome org and GitHub, and everything's going to be in there, as it always has been with all the other
it goes in our kind of umbrella. It's github.com/google-chrome/UI-element-samples. We will link it. You can find it based off previous episodes. It's always in the description for that. And this code will go up there. Bit of a funny name, UI element samples. This isn't really UI work today, but I hope you'll
It started out differently and it evolved.
So your no cache was basically there to do the max age 0 must revalidate.
Exactly.
Just squishes down to no cache. It's a kind of a shorthand version.
Exactly. It's just a shorthand, really.
Brilliant.
So let's see if I did this right. I'm gonna kill the server, restart it. Still no error, which is it's eerie. Like, I don't trust it.
No.
Let's use curl, and actually I'm gonna use capital I, which means only show me the headers.
Okay.
Because I don't care about the content right now. And actually, let's start with static app.js, which is a file, as we tested before, that is delivered by the middleware. So we should have the somewhat weird weak e tag.
Which
And
we do.
Sure enough, we do. And now let's request something that is delivered by our own function, and we should have a really long e tag, a SHA-256 hash, which we do. So that
And we also get your public no cache there as well.
Exactly. So that means that when assembling the header, the content, and the footer, we will recalculate this hash every time, and the user will only re-download it if they don't have it cached already.
Perfect.
Which is really, really nice. So now we have caching. Ideally, probably we would write a little bit more complex code to not recalculate the hash value every time. But these are the kind of things when I say this is not production code. This is more about
Right, and you'd probably consider a CDN and other kind of intermediate caches and so forth to make sure that things only hit your server when they absolutely have to. But for the purposes of today, we're showing, and this does come up on the chat sometimes, we aren't always going to jump to a final solution that maybe a prefabricated one. And the reason is not because we don't like them. Often they do a very, very good job. But this is our opportunity to kind of show the underpinnings, if you like, the kind of engine, the essentials, the engine inside, so that it's about the principles more than the code. So
also, I think we're both kind of the opinion that if you have to know the basis that certain frameworks are built upon to be able to fix them. If they don't do what you want for once, which usually, if you use frameworks, you will have run into the problem that something is not doing the same thing you would like it to do.
Yeah, maybe you go somewhere and they say, you know what, all we do is write Python, and you think, I don't know, I'm used to writing in JavaScript and Node. What do I do? Well, if you know the kinds of things, the kind of headers you should be setting, the kind of ways you might build, it's more a case of plugging things together rather than anything else. So that's kind of
it's what you do versus how you do it.
Ta-da! There you go. Right.
Quote me on this. All right. So technically, we just got server-side rendering, which is really, really cool. So if we go here, this should all be working as it is before, and we're actually assembling these pages on the fly. However, something that might be a little weird. Can I disable cache? Let's disable cache, because I see that we get 304s, which is not modified.
Which is good, right? That's what we
wanted.
wanted.
That's exactly what we wanted. But in this case, I wanted to point out that if we don't have caching enabled, that if the site downloads contact, it actually downloads the entire site, even though, again, header and footer are pretty much the same.
Right.
And if you look at the only content we actually need from contact is this single line. So we're actually being pretty wasteful with the data that's being downloaded when the user switches to another tab.
So the little bit more context here, I think, is that in the JavaScript code, we download the full document, don't we?
Let's look at the header. So yeah, we basically would say the root is this one. Oh no, actually when we go to about, the SC view requests this website from the server, the entire thing, and puts it into the DOM, pulls out the part it needs and switches out the...
But it takes but it downloads the whole document and then query selectors out only that little bit. So you're saying what we should be doing is just send down that little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since we're going to throw away the rest anyway,
go
on the server side.
Do it.
So, look at our index HTML index in our at our well, index.html root, I guess, we could do something really sneaky. What we could do is we could add support for a query parameter.
Okay.
So right now, if we do something like this, we will get the entire site. Oh, let's do that one. We'll get the entire site. But what would be nice is that if we add something like partial, that we only get the bits that are actually relevant for our server side, for our client-side JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if partial is in the request query dictionary, and now add logic. So as you can see here, we have a lot of files that are being read. But if we have partial, we actually only want to read
Typo.
we only want to read this file. Oh, my copy pasting is off the charts today.
It's still better than mine.
So we're going to use let for once. We're going to use
Whoa.
let because we're going to change it. If we have partials, we're just going to read one files. If we don't, we want to read all the files. Boom.
Okay, so you ask for partial, we'll only give you the little bit in the middle. If you don't, we will
Exactly.
give you the header, the middle, and the bottom. Okay?
So let's promise all files, which sometimes might be an array with just one item in there and sometimes with 3.
Somebody is asking, what is the actual benefit of server-side rendering?
User experience mostly. I think I touched on it earlier at the beginning, I guess. If we didn't do this, and we didn't do like rendering out all the pages ahead of time and saving them as individual files, the user would have to wait for the JavaScript to spin up.
So you've got to download all the JavaScript, build the page on the client, and then inject that HTML.
And usually in between there's also a request to the server to get the actual data that the user wants to see. Or you have to maintain multiple copies of the same index.html, which is probably more developer experience, but also is very error prone. Because the second you do something wrong, everything can break apart. So
yeah, one of the superpowers of the web as well, it is really worth pointing out, is its ability to stream. If you look at a large document...
you said it.
Yeah. If you look at a large document on the web and it's like several megabytes large, it can still render after the first few kilobytes have arrived because it has, hopefully, potentially if there's some inline styles, it's got enough to get something up on screen. If you're gated on your JavaScript, you have to wait till it's like an entire kind of bulk download is finished before you can get anything on screen. And so having something where the server can immediately respond by going, look, here's some HTML and ideally some inline styles or whatever, get that up on screen, and when the JavaScript and everything else is ready, then you can progressively enhance into other things. That's good if JavaScript breaks, which is something that can happen in reality.
I was just on a vacation in Indonesia where internet is noticeably slower than what we're used to here. You really feel the difference of websites that do care about delivering the right content on the very first response versus a site that need JavaScript and everything to just get started.
Basically, performance and resilience are at least 2.
And so this performance, we're doing it on Supercharged.
Ta-da! Carry on.
Carry on, I will. All right, so we have files, and we're gonna do, the rest stays the same. So if it's just one file, we're still gonna turn it into a string. We're still gonna compile it with handlebars, even though nothing is gonna happen there. And then we're gonna create a hash, set the headers, and send them back. So all the pipeline stays exactly the same. We just added one if to handle partials. So let's see with curl if it's actually doing what I want. So I'm going to reset. Syntax errors!
You got one. Oh, it's not supported outside strict mode. Now, didn't you say to me earlier, I'm pretty sure that ES 2015
I think that's the case. Apparently
you need to put in use strict.
Apparently
I think in newer versions of Node, you don't need to
maybe
put use
I was
strict.
on Node 5.
Yeah, Node 5, 6.
This is Node 4.
So yeah, I think that...
Let's give this a try again.
That's a good start.
I can live with that.
Okay, so now you can do your...
So let's start. Does the old version still work where we get the entire document?
Yay.
Yes, it does. Okay. And let's add partial, and we just get a single line, which is awesome. And also it has a different e tag because it's a different document, which is good. So let's go, let's actually go into your code and get to patch up your code. This is so exciting.
I don't know what you're talking about. I write flawless code.
Let's look. Is this the router? The router.
Well, I'm not going to help you now, am I?
No, it's the view, because the view takes care of actually loading the data for itself, because that's actually sensible design.
Oh, you recovered it.
Saved it.
Yeah, move it.
All right, so somewhere in here we should have the XML HTTP request. This is the onload event. There we go. So what you do is you just use data, which is, I think, the part of the URL that we've just navigated to. And the only thing we have to do, really, is to append partial. I don't trust this. So I added partial. That means that now our client-side code should only load the data it needs to refresh the views. Let's go back to the browser. Let's go back to home and refresh. And because we have the preload headers, we already loaded the different. I mean, I can go here. It should still work. So everything looks right. That is good. So it's still working. And let's take a look at what about actually loaded.
Somebody's asking if you can, when you get a moment, can you disable JavaScript and just show the benefit of server-side rendering when this is done? Because we just switch off JavaScript, right? And then it will just show that the links actually work without.
Will?
Yeah, because they'll just.
Yeah, readable. Yeah. Okay,
anyway,
so here, wait, let's reload. Let's go back to home. Let's reload. Hide the console. I'm going to click on About. We loaded About partial. And that means that in response, we're only loading a single line of markup instead of the entire document, which is, yay, winning for us. So we're going to save a lot of data. So now, let's do that. Since this seems to be working fine, we disable JavaScript. Home, refresh.
Okay, click around. About, contact, missed.
See, there's no animation because we have no JavaScript that does.
But it still works. You're still getting to the.
This is progressive enhancement done right, because even without JavaScript, the site is actually fully functional.
Winning.
This is really, really good. And then we just enable JavaScript again. We reload our website and we get our nice switchy animations. So in the end, we just wrote a backend in about 70 lines. I want to give this one more try.
Okay.
I just want to.
Go on, I'm gonna.
Actually, I'm here on Speedy the entire time, and we're still on HB1, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on here. I'm gonna blame Node 4.
Okay. That seems like a thing.
If you want to know why this didn't work, follow me on Twitter at Surma, and I will figure this out because this is bugging me.
Yeah, well, it's the only issue you had, and you had it early doors, and you recovered beautifully, I must say. Are there any other questions on?
Yeah, how is the chat doing?
The chat is doing brilliant. There've been so many great remarks, so many brilliant chats in here. I've been really enjoying it. I see why you do this. This is
really rewarding.
Really good fun.
We have really nice people out there in the chat.
Yeah. So I guess like you said, we've got 70 lines of JavaScript. We're going to push it up to the GitHub repo so that you can have a look around, and we'll probably add maybe a few comments in here and there. And I did add one content. I'm going to get you to move that regular expression out from there.
Yeah, I'm going to clean that one up because that is just it makes your eyes bleed and nobody knows.
No, it's not good. It's really not.
Even
good.
The comment doesn't help.
All right. Okay. Are we done?
I think we're done.
Wow.
We got server-side rendering in under an hour.
Perfect. Okay, well in that case, I guess all that remains is for me to say thank you to everybody who's joined us on the live stream. Don't forget that you can subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at AeroTwist.
And at Surma.
And we will catch you probably in the TLDW. Too long didn't watch. It was TLDW.
It was TLDW.
Yeah, I got it right this time. Well done me. Normally when they record those videos, it takes me a lot of takes to get even the slightest thing right. It's a bit like my typing. It leaves a lot to be desired.
It's his life.
On that exciting note, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching.